Hey everyone, a nerd named Mark here. I know different camera angle, everything is currently being reorganized in my recording office area. I put up a new shelf because I ran out of room. And so it's now Ultra May. I did an announcement video saying, the month of May was just going to be a bunch of Ultraman content. Still going to do my regular content as well. Don't worry. And I felt like for the first video, it's only right that I go over what got me into Ultraman the moment I fell in love with this franchise, because everyone has that moment when, whether it something Toku, whether it was Godzilla, Ultraman, Metal Hero, Kamen Rider, Super Sentai, whatever it was, we all have that story and that moment that we were like, this is amazing. I this is my I love this franchise. Let me just immerse myself and just dive into it and just become basically obsessed. I mean, I'm not obsessed. I'm a collector. I watch the stuff. I will never claim to be a historian because there's a lot of episodes, a lot of seasons. You forget stuff. But I am kind of a curator. I do have all the Blu-rays and DVDs that have been released. I do have a video I will be working on going over my complete Ultraman collection. Figures, uh, model kits, Blu-rays, DVDs, everything. That is going to be a little down the road in the month because it's a lot to record and edit. So this video, like I said, I'm going to go over what got me into Ultraman and just how I fell in love with it. And in order to do that, we have to rewind the clocks a bit. We have to go back in time to 1998 to 1999. So I'm in sixth grade, almost seventh, almost junior high. This is around this time when I had got into Godzilla, and that's actually when I learned the terminology kaiju. And because I was like, oh, Godzilla fighting monsters, and then it's like kaiju. I'm like, what is that? Luckily, back then, even though I lived in a small town, there was a lot of comic book shops, card shops, collectible shops, and I would go in and be like, hey, do you have Godzilla? Like, I wanted Godzilla stuff, like little figures and statues and this and that. And, I was like, what about the monsters? And I was like, are there other things that have monsters like this? Because in America, we weren't getting shows like that. Yeah, we had, at the time, Power Rangers was like, what, three, maybe 4, 5 years into being around. Um, we had some failed adaptations. We were just on the cusp of getting the 1998 Godzilla film, or it had just come out. And I was, there's this toy store and collectible store called The Kid in Me. And this is where I used to get, Pokemon cards, Magic the Gathering cards, some of my action figures, this and that. And talking to the guy who owned it, I went there every week, like I did, chores and allowance and stuff like that, mowed lawns and paper routes, and save my money. And I would either go to Funko Land to get video games, or the Kid and Me to get some collectibles. So with talking to the guy who owned it, and mind you, this store was open for so long, I was going there well into getting out of high school. Like, I was going there for a very long time. I love that store so much. I miss it. It closed down years and years ago. So he was explaining to me, like, well, Godzilla is movies. So obviously you weren't getting like a television show. It wasn't serialized. It wasn't a television show. So I really enjoyed Monster. I could only watch so many Godzilla films over and over again. I wanted something new. And then he brought up, well, if you like monster battles like this and that, there's Ultraman. And I was like, okay. And he showed me, like, back then VHS was a thing. That's where everything was on VHS tapes, and that's a lot of tapes to watch a season. And he was like, yeah, it's not as easy to get everything, but they do have some stuff. And I was introduced to the OG Ultraman. And he was like, well, it's a superhero. He transforms, he gets really big, and he fights the monsters. It's basically a human fighting the monsters. And I was like, so it's not just two monsters fighting. Like, I was very intrigued by this because up until then, my outside of Godzilla, my knowledge and my exposure to monsters, this and that, is all right. You got the Power Rangers, they call their Zord, they have the Megazord, Mecha versus, monster. Whereas this was a superhero who gets big and fights them mainly with punching, wrestling moves, and beams. And I'm like, I'm sold. So I got into Ultraman that way. It didn't really click with me right off the bat because in this time frame, I wasn't like Ultraman has a weird history with how it's been released. Like you can get stuff was subbed, and then there were dubs that were released also. And I just think at the time I didn't really care for or appreciate subtitles as much. Like it's one thing when you're watching a Godzilla film, you know, and Godzilla had some bad dubs also. But it's another thing when you're watching a show, and hyperactive me could not really focus with it. But I did like it. I did like the kaiju's and this and that. 'Cause like I love Godzilla, I love Ultraman, but man, I just love big monsters. I love kaiju's. And that was like the appeal to me was look at these kaiju's, like, flavor of the week. There's a different monster every. I was like, that's what I enjoyed. I wasn't watching it for this story, I just wanted to see monster fights. That's it. And it wasn't until years later when I was in actually high school, and we started getting DVDs and this and that, and there was a store called Charmed, which hindsight 2020, I don't know how this store stayed active. Like if you go back and you listen to episode 111 of a Nerd Named Mark podcast, I had Kaiju Carl on there. Fun, great episode. Two old men who like Toku just talking about, the struggle of getting Toku back in the day. But the store had a lot of stuff, all subbed, and it was like anime, Godzilla, Ultraman, Kamen Rider, like everything you can think of on VHS, and they upgraded to DVDs at one point. But I noticed, not at the time, I didn't notice, like they had a membership thing where buy 10 get one free, and VHS and DVDs. They even had video games. Actually, side story, I actually got the Ultraman Super Nintendo video game there, and I also got Dragon Ball Final Bout, GT Final Bout, and was it Ultimate Battle 22 for the PlayStation. I had to get a Goldfinger to basically mod my PlayStation to do that. But I noticed outside of the games and actual like posters and this and that, all the movies, VHS, DVD, were all bootlegs, like hardcore bootlegs. And I was going up there with my money, being like, here's my $8, get one VHS tape, and it would have like maybe 3 episodes on it, 4 if they were shorter episodes. And I was just absorbing all the old school like Showa Ultraman, like regular Ultraman, Ultra 7, Return of Ultraman. I even, what was the other one? Ultra Q too, which that was, and I'm gonna get into this. Ultra Q is what really got me, because I've always been a fan of sci-fi, like Twilight Zone, stuff like that. And Ultra Q was basically a kaiju Twilight Zone, because all the episodes were isolated stories. They didn't really lead into each other, which got changed when Neo Ultra Q came out, which is one of my favorite. I'm going to be doing a whole ranking and going over all the seasons and movies at one point this month. There's going to be a video for that. But I really enjoyed, buying all these, and I wouldn't go every week. It wasn't that far. It was like, 15-20 minute drive from my house. So it's obviously convincing the parents, be like, hey, I want to go to Charmed, like, please, I want to get nerdy stuff, I want my things. And I was going there for a couple of years until they got closed down. I assume they closed down because everything they were selling was bootlegged. But at the time, this is where I started getting into more Godzilla stuff. This is when I realized there's more than 3 Godzilla films. 'Cause at the time I was watching the same 3 Godzilla movies. I was watching the same regular Ultraman season over and over again, because I had no other access to other stuff. This was before LimeWire and the internet as how it was able to find things, because this is still late 90s, like 2001 2002. So by now I have 4 or 5 seasons of Ultraman. I've discovered a whole slew of Godzilla films that I wish I had known about, because I was just watching Godzilla and versus Mecha Godzilla, Godzilla versus Space Godzilla, and what was that other one I was watching? I think it was Destroy All Monsters. Those were like the only three I owned at the time. But the Ultraman stuff like hooked me in when I was going through and watching it, because it was just, once I got a couple years older, I wasn't 12 anymore. I was now in the mid-teens, and I was actually like paying attention to the dialogue, the story, the music, every little nuance, and I was like, man, these, like, Ultraman got me. Like that, I was hooked. There's a point where I think I enjoyed Ultraman more than Godzilla. I definitely enjoyed it more than Power Rangers, because at this time, mid-teens, high school, I'm playing sports, I'm working a job, I'm, you know, mid-teens, I'm being social, this and that. So it's like I kind of was like, Power Rangers didn't evolve with me, it stayed in that same demographic as I got older. So I was like, all right, kind of grew out of that, got into the Japanese culture stuff pretty heavy, and Ultraman was just, and I always like, I just like the kaijus, honestly. That's what got me into it. Like I feel like a broken record, but like kaijus are like a gateway drug for me. You give me kaijus and I will watch your shit. That's like, all that opens the door to me. I'll at least start it. And it wasn't until, then there's years I fell off. Like, you go to college, you're starting to work on your career. I fell out with Ultraman. And around that time, I discovered Kamen Rider, as I've talked about in my history of me getting into Kamen Rider video that I did last year. And with Ultraman, I was just like, I didn't really get back into Ultraman until recent years. Like, I was keeping up with some of the stuff. I would see, posts online and thanks to social media and YouTube, I would see intro videos and theme song stuff. And I was like, oh, but then I didn't really get back into it fully until, about 2 years ago. Mill Creek Entertainment got the rights to start distributing Blu-ray versions of Ultraman. And I was like, I haven't watched an Ultraman in so long. Like, I kind of want to check this out. Because in the recent years, about 5, 6+ years or so, I've been keeping up with Kamen Rider. And, obviously with the MonsterVerse, Godzilla's been back and big again. But so I started back. First Blu-ray I bought, Ultra Q, and then Ultraman, and next thing you know, I have, now I have everything, and I've been watching almost everything. I'm almost done, and I think what I love about Ultraman is just, it's good storytelling. It really is. I know a lot of people joke all the suits look the same and this and that, which I get that most of the time it's trolling. Like, there's such a decisive divide in why people don't like Ultraman. But then on top of the Blu-rays, like right now, Ultraman is probably the easiest accessible Toku on right now coming out of Japan. Subaraya is doing the YouTube channel where they're simulcasting it subbed. Like, when a new series runs, like they did that with Trigger, they're gonna be doing it with Decker. They like, and then they have their Ultraman Connect website where they do special live streams, and they're bringing in previous cast members for interviews and announcements. Like, as of right now, being an Ultraman fan is so easy to be an Ultraman fan. It's also really easy to get into Ultraman. And so, yeah, I think right now, like, being an Ultraman fan, this is like the happiest I've been, because of just the lack of effort on my part that is needed to enjoy this franchise, to watch seasons. Like, I just finished rewatching Ultraman RB, which is one of my favorite seasons ever. Like, RB is easily one of my favorites. Geed is another one that I'm a huge fan of, and Orb. I'm waiting for Mebius to come out this summer. I actually just finally, because it just released in April, I got the Ultra 7X, which I started. I'm going to be finishing that. Like, it's such a great time to be an Ultraman fan. And it's also a great time to get into Ultraman, which I have a whole nother video I'm going to be doing, breaking down, like, how to get into Ultraman, like where to start, depending on what you're into. Because there's a lot of seasons. They're all there's a formulaic process behind them, but not every season is the same. There's certain ones that are going to appeal to you, some that won't. Like the recently ended Ultraman Trigger, New Generation Tiga. I like Tiga, but I didn't really. Trigger kind of fell off for me. I still finished it, but it wasn't. It didn't. It just something was missing, and yeah. So before I end this video, in the comments, let me know, like, genuinely, what is not even your favorite Ultraman season, but from a Toku standpoint in general, what was that moment when you fell in love with the franchise that you're in love with? What season was it? I know I have friends who are huge Super Sentai fans, and they're like, man, like, you gotta go watch Gokaiger, or you should watch Car Ranger, or all these other ones, and like the loot, like there's, and I'm like, okay, I'll check them out. Same with Kamen Rider fans. You have people who love Kamen Rider that like they're like, yeah, X8 is what I started with, or started with Decade, or Build, and everyone has like, and that's the cool thing about Toku and Ultraman and everything else. Everyone has a different point that happened that got them into it. So I just want to know genuinely, if you're not an Ultraman fan, that's fine. Let me know what Toku show got you in love with that franchise. If you are an Ultraman fan, let me know what Ultraman season, like in series, got you into it. For me, like I said, younger, it was just regular Ultraman. That's what got me into it younger. When it comes to me being older, it was honestly like Geed and RB that really hooked me in and got me like, I'm back on the Ultraman train. Like, give me all the stuff. And then also, I didn't even talk about, like, we had the Ultraman anime on Netflix, which season 2 just dropped. I have to watch it. I haven't had time. I am going to be watching that at some point. But that's really it for the video. If you sat through this whole entire thing and you watched it, I thank you guys for watching. I really do. I'm on the cusp of 500 subscribers. It's ridiculous. It's insane because I'm just a nerd who likes to talk about Toku stuff and comic books and video games. So the fact that you guys watch my videos, support the videos, even some of you don't like some of my videos, I saw the feedback and everything going on with the whole Don Brothers video. Listen, if you watch the video straight through, I explain everything and I'm not shitting on the show. So, I mean, some of you didn't even really watch the video, but that's beside the point. I thank you guys for watching. If you see the red button down below, that means you're not subscribed. Hit the subscribe button so you know when more Ultraman videos and other Toku content and podcasts and video game stuff goes live. I thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.